All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the, I say regularly scheduled, slightly different time, Economic Development Trust meeting. And we will proceed now. It's the appointed hour and everybody's in place. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the August 7th meeting, and these were distributed to the trustees in advance of the meeting. Are there any comments or changes on the minutes as were distributed?
Only on the minutes it says at 2 o'clock, and it was actually 1 o'clock on the header.
Okay. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Comments? Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
As amended.
Amended as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second. Is there any further discussion? Please cast your votes. And the minutes are approved. Thank you very much. The third item on our agenda, or the next item on our agenda, is the ratification of the claims that the trust paid in the last month. These claims have been distributed to the trustees previously. Are there any questions or comments on the claims? Most of them were associated with TIF projects. There are a few gold projects in there. Any questions or comments on that? I have a question then. On the last item is a payment to Continental Resources for their salary and investments and things. Is that roughly the amount that we'll see annually for them?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that number will go up. That payment to the Continental is based on an average of 80 jobs, and they're scheduled to create about 400 jobs. So I anticipate in the future years that number will increase.
Okay, good.
Because they actually finished their first fiscal year with 145 jobs. So, but the average was 80 over the 12-month time frame.
And all the jobs that we were paying for are new jobs, none of the people who are transferred?
Yes, sir. They're above the 255 employee count that they had when they made their announcement they were coming to Oklahoma City.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the claims?
Well, there is a cap, though, is there not?
Yes, sir.
How much total? And
Yes, sir. There's a cap.
Are there any comments or questions on that? Chair will entertain a motion to approve or ratify the claims.
Move it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to ratify the claims. Is there further discussion? Comments? Please cast your votes. And the claims are ratified. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is some items that need individual approval. Item 4A is associated with Project 180 downtown project. Are there any comments or questions? We have an expert here in the audience. Two experts, it looks like, back there. So we're doubly blessed today. Are there any comments or questions on this? This is a change order on an existing project. Chair will entertain a motion then to approve the change order.
So move.
Motion made and seconded to approve the change order. Are there any comments, additional comments? Cast your votes. And the change order is approved. Thank you very much. Item 4B is a plans and specifications for the Oklahoma River landing. And this is not a MAPS project, GeoBond project. Sorry.
This is actually going to be funded by TIF District Number 4, the Dell Oklahoma Riverfront TIF District, and it's for improvements along the Oklahoma River to enhance the trails and some of the other amenities that are located along the river. We have a representative from Guernsey here this afternoon to explain and go through a presentation on what the improvements are.
Very good. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for letting me be here. I'm Mike Satong. I'm with Guernsey, and I'm here to give you a little rundown on the Meridian Landing Promenade. And you can go to the first slide. We are to the east of the Meridian Bridge, in between that and basically the inflow where the creek comes in, and where the boats for the river cruisers park. And our improvements are back of house, back of those hotels, to the shoreline is where we're going. And you can see what we're doing is we're going to put in a 20-foot wide pedestrian promenade that's going to push people closer to the hotels and create more of an urban edge along the river. We're going to have some nature overlooks and other seating and lighting along the trail. There's also a large plaza that we're calling the River Overlook Plaza that'll have some interesting lighting and place to gather, and people, as the boats come in and leave, places for them to hang out, take a seat, bring a lunch, do those kind of things. And to the west by Meridian Bridge is where we're tying into the first, that's where the MAPS 3 trails, the first phase of that is, we're tying into that, and we've been working with our partners, not our partners, but our colleagues, on getting them some survey information and coordinating with them so the trails will come together and there won't be any grade issues and those kind of things. So we're also improving the existing parking lot with some landscape and some other things down there, and the faded out things are we were also asked to look at future development there at the boat dock, but that's not in this scope. That's just kind of future improvements, if you will. You can go to the next slide. Here's just kind of character of some of the hardscape elements. We're going to have some interesting lighting. We have a concrete retaining wall that we're going to light and make it kind of glow, so it kind of goes with some of the things that are going on the further down by the boathouse. Tie those to, we're kind of the western bookend of the river, so we want to help tie all of those things together. Those are just kind of some interesting lighting and hardscape elements that we are going to incorporate into the project. Again, you can see the wall that's going to wrap. It's a couple hundred feet long. It's going to be canted out. It's going to wrap around in a semicircle with a cool railing and lighting. So it'll really brand the spot and make it an interesting destination on the west part of the Oklahoma River. There's just, again, to give you a plan, bird's eye view of what some of the lighting is going to look like there. Again, they're all the hotels, so people will be looking down on the project a lot, so that area, hopefully we can draw some people out of the hotels, maybe get them to the boats and do some of those things. There's maybe one more. Sections, this just kind of shows you the existing area. The slope is pretty severe, so we're going to try to stay out of there with our grading and keep it very natural. That's what we get a lot of comments from people who do the riverboat cruises, and they love this part of the river because it's all natural, and you see birds and animals and trees and grass and things like that. So we're trying to keep it as native and natural as possible, but really juxtaposing a real urban edge to that native environment. I think that's it.
Any questions? Yeah, Larry?
Just a minor point. At the far west end of your first drawing, you show a circle and a terminus.
Yes.
But that is not going to be a terminus, is it not? Is it not going to be a kind of a seamless continuation when the trail from Meridian to Council gets in?
You are correct. That is where we're going to tie in. The reason the circle remains is there was a want or desire that if someone was coming from the far end of the river, the far eastern edge, that they would have an opportunity, if they didn't want to continue down, they would have an opportunity to turn around and not have to do a weird get off your bike and turn around. They could just ride back around and continue a loop back east.
But there will be the ability to continuously ride your bicycle, for example, west.
Absolutely,
And go
yes.
circle around, go north over the bridge, and then head further to the northwest.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Larry, this is in your award. Have you got any other comments about just the value of the project?
Well, this is a great amenity. The only thing I would say, we're looking at this as the western terminus of the river, but really when that trail gets open all the way to Lake Overholser, that whole western area from Meridian and Southwest 15th to Lake Overholser is suddenly going to be open for who knows what. And there's some real gems out to the west that will suddenly get more popular, like Crystal Lake. So the designation of western terminus, yeah, maybe the western terminus for the boats themselves, but not for the use of the river trail itself.
That's correct.
Frank, you? I'm sorry.
The proposed environmental, that's not in this construction cost?
No, it is
Does
not.
NIC mean not in construction?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We had incorporated some of those into our original plan. This is about 4 years in the making, so it's undergone many, many changes, but that was something that we wanted to keep in everybody's heads as further development goes on, so, but not in this contract, unfortunately.
What's immediately west? What's immediately west of the,
It's an open field right now. There's nothing immediately west of that parking lot. It's there. The bridge goes over where you see that kind of the drainage area there. There's a bridge that goes over and connects to the trails, and it's open field, I think, as far as Dell. Is that correct? It's pretty much open all the way to Dell, I think, from here. Yeah.
Are there any other comments or questions? Have a motion made to approve.
Second.
Motion made and second. Is there further discussion? Please cast your votes. And the project is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the bids are to be received September 25th. And then what would be the construction schedule then beyond that?
Once we get all the approvals, I think we've scheduled 120 days for construction of the project.
Starting sometime in early October then probably?
Yeah, we're hoping mid-October, early November, that how everything kind of gets moved, just get pushed. So we're hoping that's kind of a realistic time frame.
We want to hear that. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is item 4C. This is a joint resolution of the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust and the City of Oklahoma City amending the Strategic Investment Program, SIP. And we had a presentation on this at our previous meeting. Are there any additional comments or questions as we've gone forward? Larry?
Yeah, I still have concerns over the, let me get to the correct page. Page 9, the land assemblage program. And there's some wording that appears not only in that particular section, but a number of the sections which concerns me. And probably this goes to Wiley. In a number of places it talks about, as set forth by the State Act 62 OS, 802. What happens if that allows things that were not really intended in the original gold bond program? Which statute takes precedent?
Well, actually, it would be the direction of the board would establish, I can tell you what the legal ramifications are or how far you're permitted to go or not go, but the board will ultimately decide whether a particular program, land assembly purchase will be allowed. I can tell you whether the statute will permit it, but you get to decide whether you want to do it.
Well, we will only do it if the statute permits it, Calvin.
Right.
See, my concern is in the original gold bond program, and this was just my interpretation, I did not think that the gold bonds were to assemble land, but it was to incentivize people as the final move over the edge to come. And the way that the gold bond program has been implemented up to this point under Kathy and Brent has been extremely successful and has avoided any situations that I read about around the country of people overextending the use of public money and then having to eat that overextension when the deal doesn't go through. And I see this land assemblage program moving in that same potential direction, and that bothers me. And I think it should stay. If my interpretation was correct, that it was not originally intended to assemble land, that's the way we ought to keep the gold bond program as we move forward.
The program that was originally approved by the trust and the city council did allow for the provision of land as an incentive to attract companies. So far, we've used some funds for infrastructure improvements as in the case of Paycom, so that was also something that was allowed under the original program. But the provision of a site was also allowed under the original program. We never did it. We've never done it because the companies we've worked with so far have been more interested in the job creation grant program, and they were, I would say in most cases, not a significant enough investment for us to justify the provision of a site. I think when we are talking about providing a site or helping a company assemble a site, they have to be a very major employer, creating a large number of jobs that pay very well. And, you know, we've had some of those, but they really didn't require the assemblage of a site for them to locate in Oklahoma City. You know, I think this language, what it states is that the land assemblage program is allowed under the state statutes, but whether or not the trust and the council wants to provide that kind of incentive will be done on a case-by-case basis and will fit into the parameters that we've set for the program so far that include a great degree of accountability. Obviously, in the case of when you're going to provide a site to somebody, as we did in the case of Quad Graphics or Dell Computers, there would be clawbacks associated with that kind of incentive, and they would have to meet certain job creation thresholds before they would get title to the land. So, as an example. But I hope that helps to alleviate some of your concerns. I know that you're very concerned about this, and believe me, we do not want to find ourselves in the situations that you've brought to our attention in other communities.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but then I also hear talk, and there's nothing been formalized come forward, that what we should be doing is assembling this land even in advance of having the reputable company that you're talking about interested in it. And so it's a small, to me, a small leap, if you will, from where we are today to that standpoint to saying, hey, we're going to go into the real estate business and we're going to assemble X thousands of acres of land in anticipation that somebody someday from somewhere might want it. And that's the slippery slope that really concerns me.
You know, I do think there are circumstances currently in Oklahoma City where we have a shortage of large industrial sites. We have a shortage of product available for prospects that are coming and talking to us on a fairly regular basis. And we have got to begin to think about how we're going to address that availability of product for those kinds of job creation opportunities. There may be the opportunity for us to work with other public sector entities, though, and reduce some of the risk associated with acquiring sites. For example, the School Lands Commission has some very desirable sites that we would like to begin to work with them. And I think that those sites have less risk to us than maybe beginning to buy land from private real estate owners. So, but those decisions and those issues will have to be brought back to you and back to the City Council in a separate policy decision. We're working on finalizing the employment land study that was a part of the update to the Oklahoma City Comprehensive Plan, and I think that's where this policy decision and this discussion really needs to take place and be centered upon the findings of that study and the realities that we face with the availability of employment lands.
So the implementation, or the adoption of this strategic implementation plan provides a mechanism where we could do it. It doesn't say we're going to do it.
Exactly, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I share the concern associated with a worthwhile objective without clarity for the execution. Previously I've shared that. I appreciate the assurances that Kathy has provided us that clarity will happen before we are asked to attribute dollars towards an acquisition or an option. So just wanted to hopefully ask that in the form of a question to reiterate that you've promised us that clarity before we would be asked to expend public resources for that field of dreams. Previously, we had talked about the emerging technologies issues, and just wanted to share that I see in Exhibit 1 as the attachment a suggestion or recommendation on page 10 that because of other priorities and low use, it's recommended that the Emerging Technologies Program would be discontinued at this time. And I guess I'll share with you that I'm disappointed to see that because I don't know that we need to remove a future option from the rule book, so to speak. It's one thing to not bring it forward if you don't believe it's worthwhile, but to make it a matter of policy that it's not available, I think, is unduly limiting. But I guess my question is more for an exhibit that has a recommendation to who? I mean, we are asked to vote on a resolution that I assume is binding on this trust and the city in terms of promulgating policy, but it seemed odd to me the way it was worded. So just a question of clarification. If we vote in the affirmative for the resolution with the attached exhibit, are we voting to discontinue the Emerging Technologies Program as recommended on page 10?
Yes. But that does not preclude us from including one on a one individual basis. As a policymaker here, we could recommend a emerging technologies project, even though it doesn't specifically provide for it in the policy.
That is not my understanding, and I guess I would appreciate that if that's the case, but Mr. Chairman, I'm worried that language adopted specifically suggesting that a program would not be available would not allow us to later describe an exception to what's an approved public policy.
Good point.
And so again, I don't know that we need to limit future trusts or council or businesses that might be seeking that support with this attached recommendation. Just wanted to share that opinion again, that I think it's unnecessary to rule that out because we have not had past participation.
I think the trust has a couple of options here. First of all, if the trust would like to amend the policy as it's presented to them today to add the Emerging Technologies Program back in, that is your prerogative, and you could do that from the floor. Another option would be that we could develop or implement a similar program under the leverage fund program that's described on page 9. Actually, the Emerging Technologies Program was a forgivable loan program for small, mostly high-tech kinds of companies, and we could certainly do the same kind of thing, I think, under this leverage fund program. It's designed to provide financing or forgivable loan programs or possibly a revolving loan fund to help companies finance capital or other needs that they, even operating capital, if they so need. Especially important for small businesses in today's market. So I think that gives us some flexibility to do that under that portion of this new program.
I'm thankful to hear that. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm thankful to hear that, and I might suggest then that to the extent the trust would entertain an amendment to page 10, last sentence, it currently reads, in deference to other priorities and low use, it is recommended that future use of the ETP be discontinued at this time. I have faith in what you've shared and that you might, as you revisit this, come back with future consideration of what a policy language could look like that you think might be effective, whether it's a reference back to leverage program or whether it's clarity on the Emerging Technologies Program. But I would suggest that we eliminate the last sentence and give Kathy, this trust, and the city the flexibility to revisit the policy later, and would offer that as a motion.
I'd second that.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? I think including it is a worthwhile suggestion because the absence of it might have a chilling effect on companies even looking towards us for help, and we might not have the opportunity to apply some of these other paragraphs to it. So is there any further discussion or questions? We have a motion made and seconded. Larry? I'm sorry.
I have one other quick comment that I'd like to make. I find the leverage fund program also starting a slippery slope, putting the city of Oklahoma City into the banking business, and I don't think that was part of the original intent of the Gold Bond program either.
Your objection is noted then. If you'd like to make it in form of a motion, we can strike it if that's what you feel strongly enough about it.
I can count, so...
Okay. I didn't mean to discourage you, Larry. All right, we have a motion made and seconded right now to retain the language in here regarding emergency technology programs by striking the last sentence. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye, or pardon me, all those may cast your votes. And we have an electronic board up there that shows that the thing is adopted as amended. Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Mr. Chairman, just one additional question. Kathy, on the land assemblage program, it does specifically state city's effort to expand the sales tax base. And could you clarify that? Because I did not see that limiting language in previous presentations, that it's just for sales tax purposes when we have a number of other programs geared more towards job creation and the overall economic impact potential beyond retail and sales tax.
It isn't just to expand the city's sales tax base. We could strike the word sales, if you'd like, and just say tax base.
I think that would be great and provide me some comfort that we're not limiting the idea for future consideration. I'll offer a motion then to amend that sentence on page 9 by striking the word sales.
Second. We have a motion made to change one more word in our adopted strategic information plan. Cast your votes, and the amendment is adopted. So we've made two very slight, one significant, very slight, criticism, but some are more significant than the others don't. Anyway, that brings us to item 4D, which is the Alliance for Economic Development contract. And Kathy, you've got a presentation.
Yes, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I wanted to go through today instead of just kind of, we didn't vote on the, we need to vote on adopting the overall policy and not just the amendments.
Okay, I'm sorry. We have a motion made and second. I made it. I'm sure Larry or Jim will second it. To adopt the strategic implement plan as amended. We've adopted the amendments, so now we have to adopt the plan according to our council. Please cast your votes. And the plan is adopted. Thank you very much, Wally, for keeping us out of trouble. We appreciate that. We didn't know we were in trouble, though.
Well, we're trying to keep you out of it.
When a lawyer arrives, obviously there is trouble.
Okay. This is a presentation I provided to the City Council a couple of weeks ago, and I think it probably gives the best kind of overview or status report of what the Alliance has been working on and some of the projects that we've got underway right now, so I'd just like to run through it pretty quick. Just as a reminder, the Alliance was created in 2011 to better serve the economic development needs of Oklahoma City. We serve as the lead development entity to those projects that require help from the public sector to help streamline services and increase efficiencies. And we provide collaboration between public and private entities on new development projects. So just some of the projects that we've been working on, quite a few of these, actually every one of these that is in this presentation involves more than one public sector agency that has participated in making sure these developments happen. The first one is the construction of the Aloft Hotel at 2nd and Walnut. This began as urban renewal land and is under an urban renewal redevelopment agreement. There are no TIF funds in this project, but it's a good example of the Urban Renewal Authority and the Alliance working together. The project will have 137 rooms, 3 new restaurants, and an investment of about $15 million. The next project is the Maywood Apartments. This project broke ground about 3 weeks ago. It is an apartment complex that will have 139 units, and again, an investment of about $15 million. This project does have an allocation of TIF funding of about $1 million in it, and it as well is an Urban Renewal Authority project and under an Urban Renewal Authority agreement. The Hill project at Russell M. Perry and Northwest 2nd Street is one of the few ongoing for-sale residential projects that we have in downtown Oklahoma City. The developer of that project has come to the Urban Renewal Authority and asked to develop a new phasing plan so that he can acquire additional parcels in this development and begin the construction of more for-sale product for downtown Oklahoma City. All of the current inventory has been sold, so we think this is a really good sign about the for-sale residential market, and we hope that we'll see additional for-sale projects in the future. This project had about $2 million worth of TIF funding in it originally for some of the infrastructure costs. Another relatively new project that we've been working on with both the city and the Urban Renewal Authority is a residential mixed-use project in East Bricktown at Sheridan and Lincoln. The city has approved a neighborhood stabilization program allocation to this project. The Urban Renewal Authority has some of the land that they will help the developer acquire, and that we do anticipate that there will be a TIF allocation required to make this development happen. This is the old Stewart metal manufacturing yard, and it has some very serious infrastructure and environmental problems with the site. There is two very large storm sewers that run diagonally through the property underneath the existing buildings that would have precluded any kind of development from happening on this site under current building code standards. So all of those utilities have to be relocated, and the storm sewer is it's about 12 feet tall. So it's a pretty major undertaking to move the infrastructure for this project. We anticipate that there will be about 249 apartments in the project, structured parking, and a hotel development on the western end of the project. The next project is the Carnegie Center, and this is one that the trust and the city have been involved in for a long time. This is the former site of the downtown Oklahoma City Library. It was purchased by a private developer several years ago from the city. We sold it through an RFP process. The developer proposes to build 19 residential for-rent units in it. It does have a TIF allocation associated with it of about $400,000 that's been to the trust already, and about an $8 million investment in the project. The first floor will have commercial retail development along the street edge, and the developer does plan to use historic tax credits and new markets tax credits to make it happen. So a good leverage of lots of different public funding sources in that project. Another project that has involved the Urban Renewal Authority and this trust is the Edge at Midtown. This project has been on the books for a long time, but we're very pleased to announce that the developer has approved his final approval from HUD for his financing and should be breaking ground within the next few weeks. We hope that he closes before the end of September and will break ground in October. It'll be 249 for-rent units, about 7,800 square feet of retail. They received a TIF allocation of $2.3 million for over a $36 million total investment in the project. These will be very high-end apartments and commercial development along the street level at Walker and 13th Street. Midtown has been a very active area over the past few years for development, and these are some projects that are in the Midtown area that you probably are all familiar with. The first one is the 1212 North Walker building. It is 24 residential units with about 4,000 square feet of commercial development on the first floor. Midtown Renaissance received a TIF allocation for all of the projects that we're going to talk about in this presentation of about $2 million for over a $23.6 million investment. So the next one of those projects is the Klein at 230 Northwest 10th. It has 12 residential units. And then the Osler Hotel, which will be a boutique hotel located along Walker as well, near 1492 and Stella. The next project is the Guardian at 1117 North Robinson, and it will have commercial uses on the first floor, restaurant and office, and residential on the second floor, loft residential. Next project, many people probably haven't seen this one yet, and these renderings, you'd never recognize this project if you went and looked at the building today, because it looks very, very different. But at 430 Northwest 12th, they plan on building, I think it's about 12 residential units that you could kind of live, work kinds of units. They're going to add a second floor on the building and provide roof terraces and gardens that, again, this is a pretty nondescript building right now, so it's been very interesting to see what they can do with things. Yes. And then the most recent project that we've worked on with the Midtown Renaissance Group is the development of a parking garage on 10th Street. There's a need to provide some additional parking to support the retail and commercial uses along Broadway and Northwest 9th Street and the continuing growth along 10th Street and in the Midtown area. And they propose to build a 300-space parking garage just west of Broadway on 10th Street that the city has provided a TIF allocation for, and we plan to structure $2 million of that TIF allocation as a grant and $1 million of it as a loan that will be repaid by the developer. We think this is a really important step and a way to provide additional parking to an area without necessarily having COTPA or some other public agency involved in it. There's another, the next parking project that we've been working on quite a bit is the Arts District parking garage, which is the parking garage that would be located south of this building on a piece of property that's owned by the Urban Renewal Authority, and we're in negotiations with Hightower Properties to acquire the surface parking lot behind the Hightower building. COTPA plans to build a 750-space parking garage on this location with about 20,000 square feet of commercial uses on the first floor. And that's probably about a $20 million project. Another project that we've been involved with recently is the John W. Rex Elementary School. This is the downtown elementary school that was part of the Maps for Kids program. The school has been sited on a piece of urban renewal property at Sheridan and Walker. So the Urban Renewal Authority is working with Maps for Kids in the city and the Quality Schools Charter School Committee to help develop this new elementary school for downtown Oklahoma City. A targeted completion of the school is August of 2014, so we're working fast and furiously to get the design completed and approved and out to bid. And finally, the last thing that we've been involved in is the MAPS 3 property acquisition. The Urban Renewal Authority has been charged by the city to do the acquisition for the MAPS 3 Park and the Convention Center and the multimodal transit hub. So we are in the process of making offers and acquiring the property and going through the process to make all these acquisitions. We also have received an allocation for private development from the city through TIF funds to begin to acquire property for private redevelopment. And the area that we're focused on is the blocks east and west, immediately east and west of the MAPS 3 Park. As a part of our contract this year with the city is a plan to better prepare the city and the community for leveraging private investment through the MAPS 3 public investments. We're in the first steps of that planning process, where we're looking at the market and the market for commercial uses and for housing, land use and infrastructure concerns, how we will develop an implementation strategy and policies that can be used by the city in the future. And we'll also be looking at best practices for leveraging private investment through the MAPS projects. What we believe that will be some of our strategies will be the identification of catalyst developments adjacent to the park, and we'll do a thorough pro forma analysis on those projects to make sure that we fully understand how the projects will work, identification of financing sources, modeling, strategies, looking at any gaps that we have in our toolbox of public financing mechanisms, and then examining the governance, policy, and management concerns for this kind of private investment. So I think that wraps up my presentation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Frank has a question.
On that east Bricktown, Sheridan, and Lincoln, are there deep pockets there in the line of ownership from the standpoint of environmental remediation?
They are in the process of receiving a brownfields loan through the city to help with the remediation. The remediation is actually not as serious as it could have been.
I thought maybe there were hydrocarbons or something that...
There are, but
But
to remediate those is not as expensive or serious as it could have been.
Normally, anyone in the line of title, historically, is subject to being brought in to pay. So where are we on that?
Well, we're in the process of, I'm drafting documents now to provide them a loan of $1.3 million to help clean up that site from a Brownsfield loan. I would assume that they're buying the property from its current owners and taking on that obligation to clean it up.
But there's been no discussion about this becoming a Superfund site.
Right, no discussion about that.
And that's where the chain of ownership really gets involved. Are there any other questions of Kathy?
I do, Mr. Chairman. To Frank's question, is that site underground petroleum storage tanks, or you said hydrocarbons, is it some other production?
I think it's a plume of hydrocarbons that are coming from off-site. It's not an underground storage tank.
Okay. A question on a few of the properties that you'd mentioned. The Klein, you mentioned, is residential. Is that rental or owner-occupied?
Rental.
Rental, okay. And then I guess the generalized question from that, is there a balance that the city should be aiming towards in terms of incentivizing residential housing, owner-occupied versus rental, and where are we on those objectives? Because I would rather see more owner-occupied investments possible than a transient rental population in an area that we're trying to get deeper roots in, but I may not know what the best practice is.
This is something that we're in the process of examining right now as we look at some of our TIF policies, because I think that we are reaching a point where we may want to choose to not incentivize market rental projects anymore, and that we may want to look at what's considered workforce housing, which is not necessarily the federal definition of affordable housing, but projects that have lower rent levels and attract a broader income group than what some of the projects do right now on the rental end of things. But I agree with you that it would be great to be able to facilitate more for sale, owner-occupied projects in downtown. I think the difficulty is getting financing on the private market for those projects right now is very, very difficult, and we're just not having developers come forward with any of those kinds of projects at all. And it may be that we have to look at different ways of providing our TIF funding to help them get that financing, and that might be something that we'll have to consider.
Okay. And then on the parking garage that you mentioned, the Arts District garage, did you say it has TIF funding?
No.
Or does not? The 10th Street garage, though, that you indicated, I think, $3 million in TIF funding, a $1 million loan, and a $2 million grant. What assurances does the public have if they're granting someone $2 million that they don't just have to pay to park there forever? I mean, I assume that's a for-profit lot. It just seems to me $2 million seems to be a sizable grant.
Well, all of our TIF money is basically a grant.
Right.
So really how we're going to structure that is similar to our other TIF arrangements, where they don't receive the money until they've made the investment and the project is completed. It will have some public parking in it. It may be that you have to pay to park there, but there would be public parking available there. There will also be parking available for office uses. And by building that garage, it allows the Midtown Renaissance Group to develop several of those other buildings in that area that I probably failed to mention in my presentation. the Marion Hotel into residential, which has absolutely no parking associated with it. It'll be developed into 6 new residential units. And then 1100 and 1101 North Broadway also will be redeveloped into commercial buildings for office. So by making that investment, it allows the investment in those other 3 buildings to happen without any TIF allocation to those 3 buildings. So really what we're looking at is structuring it in the way that we have the other ones, where once they've made their investment and the ad valorem taxes are generated, then they get their money. So
That sounds great. I appreciate hearing
and
that.
those agreements still are being drafted and will have to come back to you all. They haven't come back yet.
Then perhaps in the grant description, if the initial grant is required for the Marion and others to have the potential, maybe we need to make sure that those things happen over time, and that garage just doesn't get incentivized to be there by itself.
Yeah.
And then if you could show the image on the school again, I would appreciate, I'm sure this is an early rendering, but
It is.
did I miss, is there a drop-off place where kids can be dropped off safely at that age?
The plan is for the drop-off to be along Dewey,
Okay. Okay.
and possibly for the pre-K and kindergartners along California. And those are some details that we are asked, actually the Urban Renewal Authority asked the school committee to take a much more in-depth look at and try to resolve some of the drop-off, the distance the kids have to go to get inside the school building, those kinds of operational issues.
Right.
So-
Obviously, I'm worried about the peak times of dropping off and picking off and what that traffic waiting for children of that age looks like in the area around it.
Which is why using Dewey is preferable to using Sheridan or Walker for that purpose. So.
In the same area, Kathy, the school is located, or proposed location is right across the street from the bus station. Will the bus station be relocated in terms of at least function as a bus station by the time the school is finished?
I don't know if that will happen in time. I know there are plans to relocate the bus station, but I don't know if it'll all work out to be the same
Because a
time.
proposed parent asked me, she's concerned about safety. Somebody grabbing a child and jumping on a bus and being gone.
I'm sure they'll have, I mean, the school site itself will be fenced. It doesn't appear that way in this site plan, but it is fenced, and we'll have, I'm sure, lots and lots of security.
Well, if there's anything we can do as a trust or as a city to accelerate the closing down of that bus station as a bus station, there have been several suggestions it might be made into a restaurant or something else different. But I think that would be a safety consideration by a lot of parents.
That's a good point.
Yes, Larry?
Shifting gears, going back to the Stewart property, that's a very large plot of land. What was the residential use intended for that property?
In the apartments,
For what demographic group?
well, there are, because of the requirements of the NSP program, there will be, I think it's about 40 units that will be affordable housing, and then the remainder will be market rate.
And the focus in that whole complex is for rental, not purchase.
Right. It's all for rent.
So there's a conflicting thing, I think, Jim, going on here. There's two kind of currents going on. One current is favoring, you were kind of favoring the ownership, but there's another current going on that some of the planners from downtown are also promoting, wanting the rental units to be involved. Do I see both of those emphases going on simultaneously?
Well, I don't know that it's an emphasis by the planners or by even the policymakers to favor rental over for sale. I think we'd all like to see more for sale. The problem is the financing. You can't get financing for sale projects right now, and you can get HUD, and the only financing you can pretty much get for multifamily rental is HUD. And so many of these projects are driven by the availability of financing. And until some of that begins to change and we begin to see a little bit different thing happening in the financial markets, I think it's going to be tough to do for sale.
See, I see kind of a chameleon approach going on because of the money situation.
Right.
Sometimes we say we really want ownership. They say, well, we can't get that because of the financing. We really want rental, and I'm not sure we really have a clear cut of what. Well, we want something. I think is the basic bottom line.
The other side of that is that there is the market for rental downtown. I mean, all the projects that are being built they become 100% rented very quickly. There's a high degree of demand for the product. So, and I think it's important for us to get more and more residences downtown so that we can begin to develop the amenities that then could support maybe more for sale units. I mean, it's the chicken and the egg, and I don't think anybody's really figured out which comes first.
I would agree with you.
Initially, we built a lot of for-sale units down there that didn't sell. And there was a demand ostensibly by the marketplace for rental. And so that's what they're filling now. And I think it's not a bad idea because it gives a potential downtown dweller an option. They can rent or buy. And there are for-sale units being built. The one project we had, the Hill, it's sold out now, and they're going to build more for-sale units down there, expensive for-sale units. But the for-sale units that have been built downtown are expensive. The Centennial, I think, the minimum was about $240,000 on that project. But so there have been some for-sale units built downtown. Rhonda, question.
What is the capacity for the John Rex Elementary School in terms of students?
I think it's 500.
Well, just to echo Trustee Ross' comments, people dropping off at peak times and just the traffic congestion in Edmond schools and them not planning ahead of time for the movement of, it's impossible to get around. And so to your point of further really evaluating is critical. With 500 students, everybody will be dropping off their kids.
Yep.
But, Ron, I'm afraid that's a problem with every school we have in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Whichever school district you're in.
It would be nice if this was thought out.
Yes.
Well, you're not going to be able to completely avoid some of that, though. I
There
think
have
is
been
the-
attempts, and well-meaning attempts by the school designers to deal with that problem, but they just can't. There's not enough real estate associated with those.
Mr. Chairman, just one additional thought on the housing issue, and then time to dismount this dead horse, but I'm excited to see the activity. Please don't get me wrong. I just wonder if there's other things we could be doing to inspire owner-occupied structures at all price points. I'm not suggesting just the edge because it's next to Heritage Hills is a riper project. I'm just suggesting I think our downtown investment plays longer as a trajectory if that resident owns it and is investing in it and is not an absent landlord type circumstance. Talking to a local banker recently about their business, I was surprised to learn they've got over $1 billion earning 12 basis points because of how low the market is right now. It's hard for me to imagine that we can't engage the lending community to do an Oklahoma City-specific project and let them know that the city is engaged in that dialogue rather than expecting a developer to come to us with all their ducks in a row, maybe. So I would just offer kind of a final thought on, you're very creative, you're very good at being creative, maybe we need to approach it a little bit different to see what we could do to not just have one project after another be rental because that's what the market seems to suggest.
Any comments or questions? Our mission now is to, receive the report. Motion made and second to receive the report. Any further discussion? Please cast your votes. And the report is received. Thank you very much, Kathy. Okay, item 4E is Business Development Foundation, which is the Chamber of Commerce, and I think they're here to make a report. Mike, are you going to do the honors?
I'll go through the report. Michael Ogan, Director of Business Development with the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. Before I get into that, though, perhaps I can introduce Roy Williams to update you on a little more current events kind of things that's been happening in the Chamber, and then we'll go through the metrics.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the trustees, good to be here. I'm very brief. I'm not giving a report, but I do have some really good news, and you probably know about it already. And that is part of our contract has to do with retail development and destination retail attraction. And with Allison Oshell's departure earlier this year, we've been in the process of doing a search to fill that position, and I'm pleased to introduce today Jessica Herrera, who is our new person in that particular position. Jessica is a graduate of the University of Texas. She got her MBA from the University of Texas at El Paso. We recruited her from the city of El Paso, where she was a city employee involved in economic development with a focus on retail development. So she comes to us with a lot of experience in exactly what we were looking for. She hit the ground running because her first week here a couple weeks ago was when we hosted the ICSC conference here. And Jessica has had a lot of experience with ICSC, both in Las Vegas as well as a multi-state region where El Paso is in. In fact, she has chaired that regional thing. So she has all of the prerequisites that we were looking for. She also has a great deal of enthusiasm. She's bilingual. And we've already had a number of meetings with potential new developers in the area. So it's our pleasure to introduce to you Jessica, so you know who this new person is. So
Jessica,
we're
welcome.
glad to have her. Thank you.
And good luck to you. Who did you cheer for Saturday night at the football game? Ignore that question.
Thank you. I'll walk through fourth quarter and actually last fiscal year's report. And let's do this a little different. Let's start with what is behind tab B at the back of the report and work our way forward. So this is the sort of the metric dashboard in terms of the major elements that you've asked us to report on: jobs, average wages, capital investment, and revenues. As you can see from the fourth quarter elements, each of those are at or above essentially 1/4 of the annual goals. So the rightmost blue column. And then you can see the year-to-date actuals either meet or significantly exceed most of the anticipated goals for performance. If you then look at what's behind tab A, it's a little more detail on both our recruitment, retention, marketing, and retail programs. As you can see, the retention program, we visited a total of 356 companies this year, up slightly from what we typically do. In that era, we worked to assist the expansion of almost 2,900 jobs. And then the table at the bottom is our recruitment efforts. We recruited a total of almost 1,500 jobs, so we're slightly below goal on that. But if you look down in terms of capital investment and average wages, those are significantly higher, which contributed to an overall number that was slightly higher than the goals. It's been a good year in terms of assisting companies both expand in the market and new companies locating in the market. If we move forward in the report to page 4 of the text, you can see one of the things that are marketing efforts. It's a list of media placements during the last fiscal year, covers the bulk of page 4 and the bulk of page 5. Cynthia Reed, our VP of Marketing, and her people have been very active in making sure that the rest of the world is aware of what's going on in Oklahoma City. And I believe that job is becoming easier as we move through time. We're no longer an unknown quantity as we once were. If we move back to page 2, third bullet from the top, you might notice we have Trinity Railcars back in business. They've ramped up employment to more than 300. They were down to a skeleton crew shortly after 2008 and 9. They ramped down given market demand, but they've started back up and are busy hiring people and making more railcars. And then if we move to page 1, the first bullet on the page lists the 6 SIP projects that this trust has seen in the last fiscal year and approved. It's been a busy year for all of us. I'm not sure if you've kept track of how many things kept before you, but those 6 companies account for almost 1,000 jobs. So this program's been very good at helping the city move forward in terms of its job creation. And then I think we left each of you with a couple of brochures that the marketing department developed in the last quarter, which is an updated fact piece that provides a general overview of the area and workforce, and then a printed media guide that went with the NBA playoffs. And I think last quarter Cynthia gave you an update of what all happened with the NBA in terms of media contacts and that sort of thing. And at that point, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Are there any questions, Mike? Mike, on page 6 of the information that was attached to the material distributed to the trustees, you mentioned the digital magazine Velocity.
Yes.
What kind of reception did it get? Do we have any way to measure how many people are looking at it?
Cynthia is probably the best able to speak to that. My impression is it's been very well received.
We do have some in-depth analytics that we can share with you that measures which stories are most read, how long time on site, and I don't have any of that with me. But I will say that Velocity has been the best reception has been from our local companies who have found that this is an incredible recruiting tool for them when they're trying to recruit new talent for positions. It's been extremely effective for companies that are using it in that way. But we're also sending this out to retail clients, economic development clients, and using it virally and pushing that each time we have a new issue. So it's been very effective, and I can get you some additional analytics if you'd like to see that.
In the next report, you might want to include a little bit of analysis of that particular.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Good, thank you very much. Larry, you have a question?
Yeah, I think I need to make a little commercial here. The strategy which I like to see done with the SIP program is really embodied in that first bullet on page 1. Of those 6 companies, 5 of the 6 happen to be in Ward 3. The biggest one obviously is not. That's the Continental Resources one. But the others are all manufacturing companies that take raw material or things and make other things, and the value for those products go outside of Oklahoma City, while the revenue for the workers stay in Oklahoma City. And that, to me, this is a classic example of what the Gold Bond program was supposed to do, and has worked very, very well, as evidenced by these companies right here. And I commend the Chamber for your efforts in bringing those forward as you have.
And the other wards are available also, Mike.
Yes. It goes back to, in part, Kathy's earlier comment about the need for product. Much of this is driven by either where existing buildings are or where available land is.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Our action here is to receive the report.
So moved.
A motion made and seconded to receive the report. Any further discussion? Cast your votes, and the report is received. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is item 6F. Pardon me, that was when this is the Technology Business Launch Initiative for the quarter, or the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, and we're going to have a report on this, I understand.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you. My name is Rex Smitherman with I2E. We are the manager of this program in Oklahoma City, and we wanted to give you a summary of year 2 of this 3-year project. And so you'll have a PowerPoint, and I'll follow that fairly closely, but I did want to give you a reminder here on this first slide of what this project is. If you remember, funding was to help start up technology-based companies in Oklahoma City to help them get started quicker and accelerate them through the growth process. And to date, we're very pleased with the results. The approach of this project, as you can see, is multifaceted. We're providing specific hands-on advisory services through our Executives in Residence program. We're providing access to capital through a larger and more robust angel network in Oklahoma City. And we are working to grow these entrepreneurs in Oklahoma City through programs such as the Entrepreneur in Residence, where we bring in mentors and experts from around the country to help our CEOs of these startup companies. We're also working with the universities to get students involved in startups. And then this is all facilitated through several networking opportunities we provide throughout the year. Next slide, please. Just a quick recap of FY12, which ended June 30th. We finally hired and completed hiring our CFO in residence and implemented those CFO services a year ago. We sent out an RFQ the beginning of last fiscal year and got approval to hire our sales executive in residence. And then one of the things I thought was interesting I wanted to throw out is that we did a joint operation with the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation where one of their technology transfer postgrads was spent time at I2E working with our life sciences clients. And we had a joint fellowship where she worked part-time with us, part-time at the Medical Research Foundation doing research. And it ended up being a wonderful opportunity for everybody involved, and we think we'd like to replicate it. This particular partnership was outside this program, and it wasn't funded by this program, but if it had not been for this program, we would not have had the opportunity to do it. So we were very pleased to report that. And the last thing on the FY12, just to give you some idea of the scope, we provided 121 unique services to 34 different startup companies in Oklahoma City. Now that could be as a work with our CFO in residence, it could be working with a mentor, but it was some unique service that was provided by this program. Next slide, please. It's a little hard to read, I apologize. This is a quick look at the year in fourth quarter of this past year. We worked with 17 companies, got our executive and residence programs. 22 received mentoring through our entrepreneur and residence programs. We had 11 student fellowships this year, which is tremendous. And we had 15 networking events, and our angel group grew quite a bit and looked at 11 deals and screened 11, had 10 presented, and invested almost $400,000 in deals this year. So that was a very, very good year for our Seed Step Angels group. By the way, I will say we did our first syndication as well. We are syndicating these deals in Oklahoma City across the country with other angel groups in Kansas City, Wichita, North Texas, and we're also establishing a relationship with a group out of San Diego. That gives us a lot more opportunity to show these deals around the country and get outside funding. The next slide just shows you a quick review of the breakdown of the industries that we're serving. As you can see, most of them are IT software related, and that's not uncommon. That pretty much mirrors our statewide graphic as well, around 45 to 48% on the state as a whole. As you can probably imagine, a startup in a software is a little bit less costly than a new drug or therapeutic drug in the marketplace. So they're a little bit easier to get going. Next slide, please. This is the part I always like to talk about is we do a survey of all these companies every year. And of the 55 companies that we've worked with over the past 2 years on this initiative, 42 returned the survey. And this is the data from those 42 companies that returned the survey for the year. 63 new jobs, 42 million, I'm reading this to you, but I like to read it. 42 million in total revenues this year, 5.6 million in payroll. And this is the one that is really a great thing when you're talking about trying to create wealth in our community. And that this average wage of $75,000 for these companies' jobs is almost double, actually is double, the average annual state wage. And so we truly are creating high-paying jobs, or say we, these companies are. And these companies also brought in $48 million of outside capital to fund their company. This data is reported by the companies themselves, and we're working on a way to figure out how we can get this data from all 55 by going through the state and getting some data from them so they can be another check against the data that's self-reported. We're very proud of these data, and then on the next slide, please, you can see a year over year. What I reported to you last year was the 2010, the 17 survey respondents, and that data in the first column, and then the averages. The right-hand columns are for the second year of the project. And, you know, if you have more companies, obviously the numbers are going to go up. So what we're trying to show on these averages is to give you a sense that the program is growing. It is doing what it's supposed to do by looking at the averages, where as annual revenues of our companies last year about $350,000, this year they're $1 million. 5 FTE to 7 FTE, it's 2 more jobs per company, and the average wage has gone up, and the equity capital raise has gone up. All categories have gone up except the new FTE in Oklahoma. So the trend is good, the numbers are good, we're real excited, we're already into year 3, and we think we're going to have as good a year next year, this year as we did last year. And we'll be back with you on a regular schedule now every quarter with hopefully a little vignette about one of our clients and one of the companies that's doing well in Oklahoma City. That's the extent of my report, Mr. Chairman. I'd entertain any questions.
Are there questions of Rex? Are all 42 companies you talk about here, are they all in Oklahoma City?
Yes. Well, there are some that are, I think there's one that is in War Acres, but it's all Oklahoma City metro area. But the majority of them, we don't include companies that are in Edmond or Norman. We only include those that are in part of the Oklahoma City metro.
Rex, is there any attempt made to segregate the costs of servicing those companies in Oklahoma City as opposed to servicing companies in other communities?
No, Mr. Chairman, we haven't segregated out the cost of services to those. We track those services, but we haven't put a cost amount. I mean, we know how much money we spent. In the report that we do at the end of each year, we provide a budget to show how much money's been spent on each of these. In fact, for 2 years, the total amount that's spent on this is $1 million, $500,000 from local and $500,000 from the feds. And so if you wanted to take that number and do some sort of division into the types of services or number of companies we served or dollar amounts per job, you could do that. It can be done.
Okay.
Yeah, and we would be certainly happy to do a little bit more analysis on that if you think it'd be appropriate.
Well, there was a question raised about the Oklahoma City funding economic development efforts in other cities.
Okay.
And to the extent we can show that's not the case, I think it would be valuable.
I would be glad to do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll have something like that for you next quarter.
Good, thank you. Any comments or questions? Our action is to receive the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rich.
So moved.
Second. A motion made and second to receive the report. Any further discussion? Cast your votes, and the report is received. Thank you very much.
Do we have time? Okay. Mr. Chairman, I have one quick overview. We wanted to bring the board up to date on the investment that the board made a couple of years ago in Predent. And to give this, Mr. David Thomason of I2E, our Vice President of Investments, will give you a very brief overview.
Okay, thank you, Rex.
Mr. Chairman and trustees, thank you. Can you move slide forward? Slide forward. Thank you. As the slide says, I'm David Thomason. I'm Vice President of Investments with I2E. High-level overview, fundamentally, Predent is approximately 18 to 24 months behind its commercialization timeline. That's the bad news. The good news, it remains on its original capital budget and the milestones that it was looking to achieve with that capital deployment. So it's been extremely frugal of its fiduciary responsibilities with regard to deployment of capital. Next slide, please. The use of those funds that were provided were to be focused on IP-related cost, vaccine refinement, and initial animal studies. Those funds have been deployed within those areas, and the initial 2 studies were completed at the Oklahoma State University Veterinarian and have shown very strong efficacy with regards to the product. Next slide, please. The activities that have been accomplished by this company, operating predominantly in a virtual mode since this last report was given to this trustee group, is that they have now successfully transferred the master seed to the USDA manufacturer, and that manufacturer has been able to demonstrate the capacity to produce the necessary volume requirements for submission to the USDA. They have completed 20 runs of it, and those samples are ready and pending submission to the FDA. They are completing their last task as we speak now, which is the development and documentation of the manufacturing processes that accompany the production of those 20 master seeds to be submitted to the USDA. The company has completed and had completed for the last 2 to 3 months their summary information form to be filed, and so with the manufacturing process, the 20 seeds, and that document, they are anticipating the submission of that literally next week, at the beginning of the week, to the USDA. The company also has had some interest with regards to the technology by a large international company for use as a food additive similar to fluoride addition to a toothpaste. This would be an additive that could go into the dry dog food itself, and so the company is looking to be able to expand the technology from that standpoint. The key risk relative to the company continuing to move forward, they have a milestone under their exclusive technology licensing with the University of OU. They have a meeting on September the 13th to renegotiate a milestone that required the company to secure $1 million in capital to fund future expansion and growth. That capital has not been required because of the delay in the commercialization timeline. The company is hopeful that they will be able to extend that, and with the filing of the USDA, in order to protect the value of all the property, we are optimistic that that will occur, but it is a risk to the business going forward. The next major risk would be actually the approval of the submitted paperwork, and then the company and the USDA within a 90-day window would negotiate what the final clinical trial is, and that's wonderful because if that trial is completed successfully, it only requires a subsequent field test and validation of it, and the company could enter the market. We're looking for this company to be able to begin staffing up, which is why we have the corporate staffing, which is what we're all the most interested in, and towards the third, fourth quarter of 2013, with hopefully, if that trial is successful, market entry in early 2014. Next slide, please. The company, over this period of time since they've received funding, has remained in compliance. They've provided timely quarterly financials, which we have reviewed and monitored from that perspective, and all necessary reports and activities of submission of either grant reports regarding the technology or submissions to the USDA and plans thereforth. Again, the company continues to have in a slightly in excess of $150,000 in cash balance, and with approximately, I've used 90% for margin of error, but it's really about 95, 96% of all funding has gone strictly to research that has advanced it. So the company is trying to position itself as frugally as possible with this capital to secure a product, and so that when we do launch staffing, we're going to be building sustainable jobs that can be supported by revenue, not sustainable jobs by the formation of capital into the company. The next steps would be is to, within 90 days of submission, if the OU renegotiation of license is successful, is to complete the redesign of that. It's a joint redesign because the company has to agree with the USDA relative to the claims of the products, and the design of the field test has to mirror those claims that the company wants. Then the last step prior to going to market would be a field study where the product is actually deployed in a vaccine to vets around the country, and they're actually utilized on dogs in the marketplace, and so they report back for a period of time, 3 to 6 months, depending upon USDA requirements, to make sure that there's no adverse side effects. That would be the last thing prior to submission of a approval for the drug from that standpoint. Next slide, please. Over the next 6 months, again, to summarize, they're looking to file this next week their complete application, modify a license with OU on the technology of it, and then launch in the first quarter to early second quarter of 2013 the final trial. Any questions?
Questions? David, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Our next item on our agenda is to get a status report on the comprehensive economic development strategy, which is we did fund it with gold bonds. We were participating with several others in doing this.
As the Economic Development Trust provided some of the matching funds required for an US EDA grant to complete this project.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Church, and I represent the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments. I'd like to recognize our Executive Director, John Johnson, and my colleague, Tracy Case. We are here to talk about the CEDS. We love the acronyms, so from here on out, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy will be referred to as the CEDS. We've actually been working on this project with the city for some time. My notes say that our first meeting was with Mr. Klaus and Ms. Kinzel in January of 2009, and that was to study the feasibility of becoming an economic development district. One of the things that we learned was that we had to have a CEDS in place in order to become designated. So we're winnowing down the funnel of becoming an EDD. And next slide, we see we have red check marks based on milestones that we've met. This midsummer of 2010, we did receive a planning grant from US EDA that would actually help in the formation of the CEDS, which is a document that you have before you. We did hire a consultant. We engaged with our regional partners, and we really learned a lot during this whole process. We were able to acquire local match thanks to this trust. And I'm proud to say on step 4, which is the 4th red check mark, on August 20th, we did submit the CEDS to US EDA for approval. Now, as we wait for them to review the document, we're working on step 5, which is preparing, hopefully, to be designated an EDD, and I'll talk about that more. The actual CEDS is a 90-page document which you have before you, and go to the next slide, please. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version, concentrate on that for a few minutes. The CEDS serves a purpose. It is comprehensive. It does represent the 4-county region of Logan, Oklahoma, Cleveland, and Canadian counties, and all the municipalities that are within those counties. And mostly, it helps establish a list of infrastructure projects that have a regional priority. We did receive projects from over 20 entities, including the city of Oklahoma City. And it was vetted out by an advisory committee. And Mr. Ryan and Ms. O'Connor did serve on that advisory board that did meet 3 times over the past year. Getting into the CEDS, we followed the outline, we followed a SWOT analysis, which is another acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a planning matrix which looks at what we have on the ground, what are our perceived weaknesses, what are the things that we need to overcome, and what are our assets that really can be maximized and utilized. There's a lot of beautiful charts and data. There's an economic demographic assessment, a target sector identification, and then finally the project list. Broken down in goals, there's 4 primary goals in the CEDS. The first goal is to retain and expand existing businesses and attract new business in the region. This is really important. We found that 2% of new business expansion is actually attributed to business relocation. So the other 98% is really all about retention and expansion of current businesses that we have. And we found that was very important. There's a lot of a lot that goes into carrying out this particular strategy, and a lot of it is already being done very well by this board and the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber and the Chamber Partnership. The second goal is to coordinate economic development efforts with our regional partners, and that's really the role of the EDD that we see it, and that's the role that we've played in the last year. We've had great relationships, one-on-one meetings, interaction with the University of Oklahoma, University of Central Oklahoma, Career Tech, the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, and representatives from all over the 4 counties. And one of the things that we want to continue as an EDD is to meet regularly. We're shooting for quarterly, but we feel that we have an opportunity to be a conduit to get everyone at the table and to really, talk about economic development for not only the city, but for the 4-county region. third goal is to develop, retain, and attract talent. This is really, really important. We have an aging workforce. There's a substantial percentage of people in state government and at Tinker that will be eligible for retirement. The boomers are broaching retirement age. There's a new void in workforce at the Tinker Aerospace Complex, which is formerly the GM plant. And then just the whole notion of brain drain in general that we want to avoid. We want to make Oklahoma City a really cool place for our young people who are graduating from our local educational institutions to stay here and carve out their careers. So, the fourth goal is to enhance and promote a quality of place. And this is really an interesting goal because, you know, who are we? We're Oklahoma City. We're not Dallas. We hired an outside consultant from Austin who helped us develop the SEDS, and that was one of the things that they really, really recognized immediately was that Oklahomans, we identify ourselves as something unique. There is a different meaning system here. We're not Dallas, we're not Kansas City, we're not Denver, although we do have a better basketball team. But we have assets on the ground that are uniquely that are uniquely ours, and we need to find a way to maximize our friendliness and our sense of place. The 6 target sectors, aviation, advanced manufacturing, logistics, and distribution. We're at the crossroads of America. We're at the intersection of I-40 and I-35 converge. Logistics and distribution is basically our capacity to provide shipping and freight distribution. Great growth potential in this. Healthcare is actually our largest job cluster in the 4-county region. And data and IT software, and Mr. Smitherman will appreciate this, there are over 500,000 people in the United States who are working in the app development industry. And that's a fairly new field. That's 500,000 people developing Doodle Jump and hopefully some other apps that are actually, more applicable. But anyway, that's data and IT is a huge growth sector that we have a vast potential in. And finally, the project evaluation criteria, as I mentioned before, we did have projects from 20 different entities. The City of Oklahoma City, I know they worked very hard on their projects. One of the things that I want to talk about is whether or not the projects fulfill EDA priorities. And the project list that you find in the SEDS is just listed alphabetical by entity. It's not ranked, and it's not weighted in any way. As an EDD, our staff will be here to support viable projects, and I know I could tell you that the City of Oklahoma City put a lot of energy and emphasis into making sure their projects were viable. So finally, so that's where we're at. We've submitted the SEDS. We have a very good relationship with regional EDA staff. We're pretty assured that they're going to accept it and that our declaration as an EDD is forthcoming. So right now our staff is working on developing a work program. The SEDS is a live document. It'll be updated annually. If there are projects that are not currently on it, they can be added. And finally, I would just want to say that we want to work together and really maximize our opportunities and our relationships that we've built. We couldn't have gotten this far without the help of this body and the chamber. I want to thank Brent and Michael Logan and everyone who contributed to this process. So that's where we're at right now.
Jerry, thank you. Are there questions to Jerry? Right?
You can talk about development of the professional workforce. It seemed to me that there's as great a critical need for the craft skilled workforce. If you're going to have manufacturing and you go down the list of several of these, it seems to me that's going to be the real Achilles.
Yeah, it's a huge void. Manufacturing jobs pay very well, and I just read a story a couple weeks ago that college graduates are not going into manufacturing because it's not cool. And so they're looking at other ways to attract potential workers. And Career Tech is, we have a pretty good relationship with Career Tech, and they recognize this void, and they're going to try and, try and fill that gap.
It seems to me we have homegrown as well as try to recruit from other states that are having great difficulties with unemployment. Is your work dealing with both of those areas?
Well, hopefully, that'll be part of our work program, and is to find out how we could fill that void, see who's doing what, and make sure that we're not duplicating any efforts.
Other questions? Comments?
Very good. Thank you.
Terry, thank you very much. All right, our action here is to receive the report. A motion made and second to receive the report. Please cast your votes, and the report is received. Next item on our agenda is the general manager's report. Okay. And then we have the general manager's report, the monthly report that was given to all the trustees. Are there any questions or comments on that? Good job. Right? Nobody had any questions. How many dollars worth of gold bonds have we issued to date?
We've allocated about $22 million and spent about $6 million.
Yes, we've actually we've issued $36 million roughly.
We've issued $36 million in bonds, but we've only allocated 22 of that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Are there any comments from the trustees? Comments from staff? Comments from the public? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.